My name is Elizabeth. You probably know my son better than you know me. His name is John. John the Baptizer. And but I have a story to tell. It's a story of joy and anticipation that turned to concern and despair until God did a miracle in my life. Now, if I could have a few minutes of your time, I'd like to tell you, because I always love telling about God's miracles, and He definitely did a miracle in my life. Now, I was known as a daughter of Aaron, which means I was born into Levitical tribe, and the men in our tribe were the priests. Now, my father, being a good priest and a Jewish father, he taught my brothers and sisters and me as he sat in the house, as we walked by the way, as he lay down at night and in the morning. And I love to hear those things because, you know, his being a priest, he knew a lot of those things. He told us about Abraham, and he was the father of our nation, and the promises given to Abraham for the land and innumerable descendants he would have, and through his descendants all the world would be blessed. Told us about Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, how Joseph, he sent him down to Egypt to prepare and to save food for our people who would be starving if he hadn't gone down there. And 70 of our people went down to Egypt. But they were down there 400 years, and you know what? There were like over 4.5 million of them by the time they came out. When Moses went to Pharaoh, and you know, they came out through the Red Sea. And you know, when I think about it, that Moses was up on Mount Sinai, and he got the 10 Commandments, but you know, plus there were 613 in all of the law. But this was the first time our people had a written law. And it was so nice that we could know what God wanted. This, of course, was establishment of the priesthood and the tabernacle, which, you know, that was the outer court, and then there was a holy place, and there the Holy of Holies, and inside there was the Ark of the Covenant. Inside that was the tablet on which were the 10 Commandments. So it was wonderful that our people, even though they didn't believe, many of them, they had to wander through the wilderness, but right in the middle of their encampment, every time they encamped, was the tabernacle. So they could see that God, He was there. There was a cloud by day and the fiery pillar by night. So, of course, you know, they wandered 40 years, and then it was Joshua and Caleb who took them in the promised land, conquered the land, and assigned the land to the tribes. Then, of course, there was the time of Judges and the time of the United King. And because they wanted a king, even though God wasn't in favor of that. But anyway, He gave them a king, we the Jews, you know how we the people have a voice. So He gave them the king, and there was a King Saul, and then King David. Oh my. Our Father, when He talked about the kingdom, United Kingdom under King David, He went on and on. Oh, please, Father, you know, this is getting so long. But anyway, He loved that. And then, of course, when the temple was built, King Solomon built the temple, when our Father talked about the dedication of the temple, he just kind of got a faraway look in his eye. And I wasn't sure, was he, you know, crying, or was he sorry he wasn't there because the presence of the Lord came so strong that the priests couldn't even stand? So anyway, and of course, you know how our people, you know, the fallen nature, got into things they shouldn't, worshiped other gods, and then they divided the kingdom. He had to send their enemies in, and they came in, destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. You know, they took the Ark of the Covenant. We never found what that was. And eventually they came back, rebuilt the temple. It wasn't nearly the scale that it was when King Solomon built it. Right. But then during that time, our people would be going, the prophets would be telling great stories of what would be coming to pass. Now, my father, many times he had some of the other priests to come in to our home, and they would be talking about the prophecies. Well, I love to hear those. But you know what? Every time the priest would have, there was, you know, well, what about this and this is going to happen? But when they got to something that Isaiah had said, that behold, a virgin shall conceive and bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel, they said, how can this be? How could this be? Well, as I got older, I thought, I don't know either. But we knew God's promise was true. Well, of course, during my lifetime, we were under the Roman rule. And we didn't like the Romans, and they didn't like us. It was kind of a mutual hate society. But Herod knew we were so many of us that we could cause him some real problems. So he wanted to keep us happy. He was very wicked. You know, he killed a wife and a couple of boys, his sons. But he built the temple again. And of course, it wasn't on the scale that when King Solomon did. But it was like God was setting the stage for something really special. And so that was a plus during my life. Well, when I was old enough to marry, I married a man who was also going to be a priest. His name was Zacharias. He was of the course of Abijah. So there were like 24,000 priests. So they had to divide them so there would be order to when they ministered in the temple. So we married. He wasn't 30, but when he became 30, he would be a priest. So we settled down. We settled down in the hills of Judah, not too far from Jerusalem, which was going to be a real good thing for my dear husband. Because not only did all the Jewish men have to go to Jerusalem for the three major feasts, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, but the priests also had to take 1 whole week in the first part of the year and 1 whole week in the second part of the year and minister in the temple. So this was going to be close enough for my husband. Well, set up housekeeping. I was busy. Of course, I had to go to the well twice a day, get the water, go shopping, because of course not on Sabbath, and fix the meals. And then, of course, you know, with other Jewish families around, we had a lot to do with them. So it was, before I knew it, a year had passed. We'd been married a year, but I was not with child. I don't understand, but that's all right. I'm just young. Second year passed. Third year passed. I didn't know what was wrong, but admittedly I was getting concerned. So I prayed. I thought of Hannah, how she had prayed, and of course God said her Samuel, so I thought, but nothing. Well, my dear husband, he thought of Isaac. Do you know Isaac was married 20 years before he had a child? So he thought of Isaac. Well, I thought about, what about Abraham and Sarah? Because they were married 25 years before they had any children, a child. But we didn't have the promise that Abraham had. So the years were passing, but there plus in that time, when my husband became a priest, it was wonderful. Because, see, I could ask him all these questions when he was at home, and he could answer it. And it was such a joy to have my husband to be married to a priest. So, again, the years were going, and the years are going. We were busy, as I mentioned. I'd always go with him to Jerusalem during the feast. And not only did we worship the Lord, but it was kind of like a family reunion. We would see our others, the rest of our family. So the time was getting by, and as I said, as many are concerned. Now, see, when we women went to the well, this was our social time. So we would hear these mothers who'd say that they just found out they were the child, or their baby just got a tooth, or took his first step, or said his first word. Well, I rejoiced with them, but you know what? It was hurting that I was not there. And so admittedly, those nights I was just, wetting my pillow with tears, crying. Well, the time was getting by, and as I mentioned, it was, I realized I was getting up in years, and I probably wouldn't have any children, but you know what? I still had a mother's heart. So we had a dear little cousin. Her name was Mary. When her family first brought her to Jerusalem as a baby, well, I fell in love with her. So every time, I'd seek out that family, and I would just, love her and have a good time with her. When she was old enough, I brought her, and her parents let her come to stay with Zacharias and me, and that would be like during Passover and Pentecost. So she had so many questions for Zacharias. We could tell her father, too, was a good Jewish father, that he taught them the way. So after she left, Zacharias and I both said, you know what? Something very special is going to happen with this gal. The Lord's going to use her. Well, time passed, and then I realized I was too old to have children. Was that painful? Yes. Were we mad at God? No, you don't get mad at God. But still, it was painful. I mean, it was like, We were in despair. So anyway, but you know what? My husband could have divorced me over this issue because having children was so important to have descendants. And by the law of Moses, he could have divorced me, but he didn't. You know what? I can't tell you how much that blessed me to have a husband who would give up all that for me. Well, because of that, I wanted to please him any way I could. So the times that he would go to Jerusalem for his priestly duties for a week, when I knew he was coming back, I'd fix his favorite meals. So this day, I was fixing his favorite meals, and one of his favorite meals, and through the window, I heard a familiar voice of another priest who'd gone with him. Well, I didn't hear my dear husband's voice, but I didn't have to wonder too long what happened, because suddenly through the door flew open. He ran practically in. You'd have to know my husband. He's a very reserved priest. He had a smile from ear to ear, shone through his long gray beard. He had tears of joy streaming down his face, making furrows in his travel dusty cheeks. And he came over and he hugged me so tight and kissed me. I said, Zacharias, I can't breathe. Oh, I said, what's happened to you? Something's happened to you. I mean, I've never seen you act like this. And I said, talk to me. And he goes, what do you mean? You mean you can't talk? Yes, you can't talk. Well, why can't you talk? What happened that you can't talk? And he goes, okay, you can't talk because of something you saw from the sky. It had wings. And first I wanted to say a bird, but then he went like this, his hands together in prayer. And I said, something in prayer, I thought, half jokingly, I thought, oh, you can't talk when you saw an angel? He shook his head, yes. I said, what? God hasn't spoken to our people for 400 years. Why would he talk to you? What did he talk to you about? And he pointed to me. Me? What about me? And he put my hands on my tummy to grow what child would grow. And he put his hands together like he was holding a baby. And then he put them in tried to put them in. I said, Zacharias, please, please, you know how painful this is. And so he goes, so he wants a writing tablet. He wanted a writing tablet. So we spent that afternoon, he's writing out what he saw. It seems he was in the holy place at the time where he was going to offer at the altar of incense. Now this was a special honor because only once in a lifetime because there's so many priests, but he was doing that. The Jews usually, they knew at that time they would come and they would stand out and they would pray. So he said he was offering at the incense, which you know that's right at the door to the Holy of Holies. And he said suddenly there was an angel there. And so he said, he was frightened. And the angel said, fear not, Zacharias, your prayer's been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son. You shall call his name John. I said, our prayer? Your prayer? What prayer? We quit praying years ago. Was it your prayer or the prayers of the priest for Israel? And well, I'm going to have a baby? How could this be? Well, then he went on. He says, and you shall have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice in his birth. And I'm going, well, that's an understatement. And he said, he shall be great in the sight of the Lord. He shall drink neither wine nor strong drink, and he'll be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. And I said, how can that be? How can that be? And he shall turn many of the children to the Lord their God, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children to the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord, and he will go before him the spirit of power of Elijah. I'm going, and then poor Zacharias said, how can this be? I'm an old man, and my wife is well stricken in years. And the angel said, I am Gabriel, that stand in the presence of God. I've been sent to show you this glad tidings, and behold, you shall be dumb and unable to speak till the day that these things shall be performed, because you did not believe my words. And the angel left. So Zacharias, he's like, he couldn't understand. What could he do now? He couldn't talk, and when he came out, the people were like, well, what's happened? And so they wondered why he was late. Well, he signaled, and they realized he had seen the vision. Well, he wanted to come